Welcome back to the Mookie Chilson channel, and you are looking live at an AstroTurf 5, and this is a VR for my best friend Scott of Reindeer Studios. Before we get to the business of this video response, I'm going to gush just a little bit. Scott is someone who I consider to be a true hobby North Star. His love for creating and collecting and sharing and caring and joking and ribbing and drawing and Cleveland and using robots to cut things up are all equal measures of awesome. And I am so glad he's been making content for 5 years. I am so glad to fill a chair in the Reindeer Arena that is now 1,500 seats and growing. And when Scott created this VR asking besties to tell him what our favorite uniforms are, I knew immediately what the correct answer was. But to share that correct answer, we need to hop in the old DeLorean and time travel all the way back to the year 1957. And that was the year that two different meteors came and hit the city of New York, knocking out the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants, who both skipped town and went to LA and San Francisco, leaving behind misery. These are the fans outside Polo Grounds in New York on the day that the Giants left. This is the program on that day, probably filled out by one of these people. But there were tens of millions of more people, maybe not tens of millions, but millions of people who were equally as upset. And here's the Brooklyn Dodgers last program in Brooklyn. And these teams just skedaddled, skipped town, left. And the New York American League team was left to dominate the city. And we all know that's not a great idea. But that's not where our story ends. No, a hero would rise from the ashes. National League Baseball would return to New York in the year 1962, led by this man on the left, Casey Stengel, hired from the Yankees. And there he is with Rogers Hornsby, which I don't know if you guys knew, was a coach for the Mets in 1962. And Casey was so wise, so smart. The old professor knew that there was no way you could field a naked team. And so he unveiled a uniform. And what was this uniform? So there you have it there. This is a sort of an artist's rendering of what the uniform would look like. And it melded together some of the old aspects of the Giants uniforms. You got the orange there and the interlocking NY on Monty Irvin's hat. And you've got the script that looks like a Dodgers script there with the swoosh underneath it. And of course the Dodger blue that the Mets would use for their sort of base color. And you put those things together and there you have what Casey's holding there. Now the swoosh would go away. But this was the uniform the Mets went to war with in 1962. This is in the spring. There's your old Dodger Don Zimmer on the left. You've got Felix Mantilla, the shortstop, Charlie Neal, the old Dodger second baseman, next to Gil Hodges, the old Dodger first baseman, of course, and Casey leading them into battle. And here is a picture of Gil Hodges in that Mets uniform. And you can notice, so a couple things are different from the original rendering. There is no swoosh underneath, and there's no patch on the shoulder. And the patch is important. And the patch, the emblem of the New York Mets, is super important. It was missing until 1964. This was the emblem that was like a bat signal to the city, calling all of the broken-hearted fans of National League Baseball back to the ballpark. This was designed by a cartoonist named Ray Gatto, who won $1,000 in a contest to design this logo. It features, you could see the interlocking NY on the left there, and the skyline of New York City. Now, this skyline is like very intentional and purposeful. These are buildings that mean something. On the left, you can see all the way over there, this is a church spire symbolizing Brooklyn, the borough of churches. Right next to it is the Williamsburg Savings Bank, which was the tallest building in Brooklyn. You got the Woolworth building there in Manhattan. This is just sort of filler next to the Empire State Building, and then some more filler. And then the United Nations building is the last building here on the right. And all of it is held together and linked together, all of the boroughs of New York, by the suspension bridge. not just the boroughs of New York, but into New Jersey, to let those New Jersey Mets fans come across and see the team. And when they entered their new home at Shea Stadium in 1964, like I said, this patch made the uniform. There it is on the right on the road jersey. There was also this World's Fair patch, which was also on the uniform in 1964, because the World's Fair was basically right across the street in Flushing Meadows. In 1965, they added numbers to the front of the jersey. So this is two patches, numbers on the front. There's actually no name on the back. And so that's the way they went for 1965 and then 1966. But while the uniform was shaping up, the Mets were not. And that is until 1967 when this guy got there. 67, for the first time, the Mets had someone who could really fill out the uniform, someone who could compete, lead, and win for all those fans who had lost out when their favorite teams bolted. And then in 1968, this guy joined the team again to manage the club. And Tom Seaver and Gil Hodges together took this team to the promised land. This is them celebrating their Miracle Mets World Championship in the clubhouse in 1969. And you can see there's an MLB logo there, which is on the left side. The Mets emblem moved to the right side in 1969. But for my money, just to circle back to it, the best uniform ever, my favorite uniform ever, is the 1968 New York Mets uniform, because they put the number on the front, no name on the back, Mets emblem on the shoulder by itself, and it was filled out by the team that would eventually fulfill our destiny and rise to the occasion of that bat signal call to bring National League Baseball and a championship National League Baseball back to New York. And so the 1968 Mets uniform is my favorite one, which I'm sure you all would have guessed. Well, maybe you would have guessed this would have been it. My 1986 Mets uniform, which again has like crazy racing stripe, which I love, and has a logo on it celebrating the 25th anniversary of New York Mets baseball, which I actually also love. I have very great affection. But this uniform had no buttons down the front. This was a pullover and had that V-neck situation going on, and did have a name on the back. By the way, Mookie was a teetotaler. He did not drink this. This was a staged photo after the World Series win. But this will have to come in second. And when Scott does a VR for his second favorite uniform, I will do my my thesis on this one. But that's it for right now. 1968 Mets is my favorite uniform. And my old friend Scott, my best friend Scott, I want to wish you congratulations on 5 years and 1,500 subs. This place would not be the same without you. And there are many, 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 many more good times and great fun to be had in the future. So thank you for everything. I think that's it. Thank you.